Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Sarah Moy. I'm the marketing director here at Modal. Today, we are very excited to chat with Chris Reggie from Digital One Group. A little bit about Digital One Group. They provide search engine optimization services for hundreds of dealers, including several from Premier Automotive. And they have been partnering with Modal and recommending it to their dealers for quite some time due to the ease of use of the tool. And many of their dealers are seeing much higher conversion rates online with Modal. We are very excited to welcome Chris Reggie, who is the co-founder of Digital One Group.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us. Chris is an SEO expert and has assembled quite a team of very well-trained writers that exclusively work on SEO, and they have a very strategic, hyper-local approach that really drives the most conversion, even in an ever-changing market. So very excited to welcome Chris today. And I also wanted to introduce our VP of Marketing at Modal, Brandy Sanders. She is going to be our host for the Q&A session today. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Brandy and Chris.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. And thanks everyone for being here and Chris for joining us. Super excited to talk to you really about more than a couple of things. I feel like the past year or two for automotive, particularly automotive e-commerce, has gone through some phenomenal changes. And so we love to hear directly from our clients and customers on what is making them successful, how they came into working with Modal, what their strategy is, and then allowing that to hopefully help other dealerships and brands and OEMs find the best results for themselves by driving sales and revenue. So we'll start off right at the top, Chris. So what were your goals when you started working with Modal? Like, where were you coming in at?
Okay, well, I think I would be lying if I didn't say to sell more cars. I don't think I've ever heard a GM say, Chris, we don't want to sell any cars. That's just not the case. Maybe they wish they had some more inventory now, but with the exception of that, it's definitely to sell more cars. That was primary goal number one. After that, secondary goals include an on-site solution, so something like that doesn't take you off the websites like you see a lot of the OEM programs pushing towards, and then a good user experience for the consumer.
Yeah, definitely. I think that that's something, and we talk a great deal at Modal about one, ease of use, and then secondly, kind of that native application. Because when you can see this experience, and I'll be agnostic about it. You can go to other solutions out there because we encourage the power of dealership choice. But it really does there's impactful data that shows that if you are on that website and you stay on that website, it's a consistent experience, whether, for example, you're on the showroom floor at the dealership, literally next to the salesperson who's kind of guiding you through that, or at home on mobile, at work, on your desktop. I really think that, and I'm sure you know this from working in web, consistent UX, UI, and ease of use is absolutely like an integral part of, one, adoption by the sales team at the dealership, and two, really going to make it better for your end user. Because if it doesn't feel the same and it feels like, you're getting one example here and another example there across those devices, that omni retail experience kind of breaks. So I think that, to your point, that's something that I know Modal really speaks to. And I'm super excited to hear that that's a part of kind of that discovery phase where you're looking at where you're coming in.
I think I'd add one more thing there. That's a good point. I think I'd add three, being, why would you spend money on marketing to get users to your website to take them off your platform?
Right.
We use the expression all the time that it's the AC is on, and it's hot in South Louisiana where I am. If the AC is on, it's kicked on, and the windows are open.
Exactly. So it's like you're bringing all of this high quality traffic in, you're doing all of the hard work, SEO, optimization, PPC, programmatics, digital marketing, email, outbound, sequences, and then you're dropping them into a room that has nothing to do with, or can't be really attributed or tied back to that effort. And then at the end of the day, you really do have to justify marketing spend, particularly in automotive, in the situation in the past year. And I know you mentioned that, I think you alluded to the chip shortage and low inventory, and we'll get to that in a minute. But I think that more than ever, people are paying attention to every single penny spent, right? And being able to tie that back is just absolutely huge. So I'm excited to hear you make that point, because it's absolutely a great metaphor. If the window is open and the AC is on, you're hemorrhaging your own. Like, why would you do that? So that's great. And then of course, we love to do kind of like the challenges and what brought you to us, but what results would you say your dealers, your partners, the groups that you're working with, have you seen so far? And we can cast that net backwards to pre-COVID to COVID to now, and then also go into even how you're addressing some of the things you alluded to earlier, like low inventory, chip shortage, how folks are kind of tying marketing attribution in. Would really love to hear on a very like data-driven, viewpoint, like what results you're seeing for your dealerships and partners that you're working with.
So let's go right into the time of COVID, right? Almost, I guess, 13 months from now. If you weren't thinking about digital retailing at that time, you were way too late and the buck had already passed you. We have a variety, hundreds of dealers, and what we see is the dealers that were set up for e-commerce did significantly better during COVID, and the ones that weren't were the dealers that were calling at 3, 4, or 5 o'clock in the morning saying, Chris, we have to do something, we have to sell cars. So I think that's there's definitely a difference in there on the mindset of the dealership, the automotive group. If you were prepared for it, I feel like COVID was a lot more manageable. If you weren't prepared for it, you had to jump into it. But what we see for our dealers and dealer partners that we see is anywhere, and I say to go back to sales, is anywhere from about a 10 to 20% lead to sale ratio. I think it's a little bit higher. That's what we see overall on an average ratio. If we can get a consumer to go through the digital retailing process, that's just, when I consider that, it's just the gateway. It's just getting their information. That's not even the full ordering spectrum. But we do see almost at least about a 10 to 20% lead to sale ratio, which is directly in line with, I think, every single dealer's goals is to sell more cars.
Definitely. And I think to your point, early adoption, and I'm sure I'm not surprising anyone in the room by saying this, but automotive is such a legacy industry. And if it's not broke, we don't fix it, right? So we tend to, it's always been this way. Early adoption isn't always the most progressive. And you really do kind of want to wait until, you have that viewpoint of like, it's an emergency, right? And so I think that ounce of prevention leads to such a better cure, right? And for the folks who were early adopters and maybe you could proactively have taken some of those steps, like you're saying, there's data to support that those who were proactive about their DR solution and used Modal, there was success on the other side of that. And I know, I speak for myself as someone who works in both operations and marketing. I know that you want to get ahead of things, right? The last thing you want is a 3 a.m. call and like, hey, we're out of inventory. There's a chip shortage. We don't know what's going on. Will there even be a car here for the customer that's coming tomorrow? I think that we're kind of dealing with that on the flip side now, right? So there's an elephant in the room with that unique idea that like, look, we are seeing an impact with low inventory. People are more critical than ever about resources, headcount, spend, making sure that you're maximizing everything that you're doing and getting the higher order values and making sure that you're really tying it all together and staying alive after such a challenging year. And I feel like folks who do proactively look at that as a solution and not a risk or an investment that leads to something that could protect you during times of volatility, which it's been proven time and again it has, is huge, right? Because it's like, I wouldn't necessarily there's always a lot of fear about change, especially in a legacy industry like automotive. And I'm sure on your side too, you've seen this, but for those that did take those extra steps, I think it really does pay off in the end, because instead of starting at that 3 a.m. phone call, the fire drill that so many dealerships we saw go through, being able to put that together is really big. And I think it's impactful, and it will impact your bottom line. It will impact revenue.
Yeah, I think we lost countless hours of sleep during COVID, but it was, the first question was, how quick can you get it on? Can you call in any favors? And of course, we did everything we could, but it's kind of like, we should have been prepared before. For the dealers that weren't, we really should have been prepared. Right.
I mean, you're asking for the barn to be raised in 5 minutes. And so that structural, that operational mindset, that structural work that you do at the beginning to set yourself up for success is huge. And in the same way that you wouldn't say, hey, I have an engine, we're gonna turn this into a car in 5 minutes, right? You've got a lot of work to do. So I think if we see more dealerships proactively taking one chunk at a time and kind of laying that solution out and acknowledging that automotive, e-commerce, digital retailing, whatever vernacular you want to slap on it, that it's a part of a paradigm shift and we can't get the genie back in the bottle. I think that's something that you're seeing on your end as well. It's like, it's not a what if, maybe I need this. It's we know that we need this. It's been proven time and again that it benefits us on both the sales side, the UX, UI side, the ease of use, and adoption by your team, because you can have the most fabulous technological solution, VR otherwise, but if the team doesn't adopt it and they can't use it simply, it won't hit the floor, right?
And I have to give props to the Modal team. There was definitely some favors called in, definitely some ask, and you saw that the DR tools pop up on some of those sites at an unprecedented rate during COVID.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge part of something that we definitely love to, to support, is we have a fabulous dealer success team and some extraordinarily talented AEs and team members here that really made magic, pulled a lot of rabbits out of a lot of hats, and are better for it. But moving on to the next question. So how does e-commerce fit into dealers' existing website experiences? And I know we kind of covered that a little bit with how it shifted since COVID through now, and now we're dealing with things like low inventory. But in your opinion, how does e-commerce fit into the dealer's existing website experience?
I think it provides a seamless and consistent experience. So seamless meaning, I think we talked about it, keeping users native to the website, not allowing them to escape. It's a seamless integration that doesn't slow down the site speed at all. It provides a good user experience. Consistently, as I like to say, is if they're utilizing the trade tool, they're getting consistent values. So sometimes you see on dealer site, they use either multiple trade tools or DR tools, and they don't use the trade aspect of it. And it leads the consumer to wonder, which is the better option? Where am I going to get the better value for my trade, especially in a trade heavy market? I think consistency in this market is very important, especially due to inventory levels.
Right. More than ever, I think, and we've heard this feedback from our internal teams, from our own salespeople, from our CS team, and then also obviously from firsthand folks working on the dealership floors, that more than ever, the consumer, the potential buyer, is crossing state lines. They're looking online. They're going from place to place. Like the days of wacky waving, inflatable flailing arm tube man on the highway being the thing that gets you in the door. Those aren't necessarily the days that we live in now, because so many folks have adopted kind of that Amazon mentality of casting a wide net and seeing what I can get, and being extremely efficient as consumers, especially in an inventory market like we're seeing from the shortage, and being really smart about that. So they're certainly more savvy than the days of yore, right? And so I think that when we talk about seamless, if they see multiple confusing buttons, you're just going to be like, one of these is going to rip me off, right? Or this doesn't make any sense to me. I'm overwhelmed. Sometimes you give them too much, they're going to exit, right? And you're going to lose them. So I think on our end, particularly at Modal, like us being able to make that extraordinarily, boom, it's seamless, transparent, it's consistent no matter where you are, where you're looking at it, internally for the sales team and externally for the users, is pretty important. So I think we've kind of gone over this. I know it's a bit down the rabbit hole, but what impact has online checkout had on that consumer experience? And I know I just alluded to this by talking about, inventory and the considerations that most consumers were seeing report after report about, Amazon impact, or people being more critically savvy than they were even like 2 or 3 years ago, and looking for their next car or looking for the next big ticket heavy purchase. From your perspective, and you spend a lot of time, I'm sure, looking at exit intent, checkout, abandonment rates, like what impact has online checkout had on that consumer experience?
One, I think the biggest benefit is it provides transparency, provides consumer trust and transparency, because the consumer can kind of dictate their journey. They can understand the financing options. And with that being said, it also reduces the amount of time spent at the dealership. That's one of the biggest complaints you hear from consumers, is it takes too long to buy a car.
Right. Yeah.
You're giving them the option to control their environment. You're giving them the transparency, and then you're overall reducing that time that they have to spend into the dealership.
Right. And I think, to your point, it's about empowerment, right? So we're empowering on both sides of this, I think. Well, particularly, I have a bias towards Modal, but like on both sides of this fence, we're empowering, one, for the consumer or the buyer to show up on step 9 instead of just coming in off the street and you know, the team has to start from first base, like literally first base. What are you looking for? They have to handle all of that. They have to do all the objection handling and really, you know, intelligence gathering, and that can be very time obsessed, right? So you get a window that, you know, the person just wants to get in and out, show me what's there, or usually is too intimidated to even get near the showroom floor. But when you have them doing it through automotive e-commerce or digital retailing solution, they're coming in, they are giving you permission-based access to see where they are in the checkout journey. So do they know what specific car they're looking at? Guess what? You can see it in the dashboard. Mm-hmm. Are they looking at 1 car or 5? Are they looking at high end or just like 1 used car beater to get to work? And then obviously when they go through that, you know, kind of those status changes and they're going through the checkout flow, they're giving you more and more information that creates a profile of the buyer that you couldn't like psychically know if they just walked into the showroom. So when that salesperson picks up that lead, even if they exit the checkout experience or they just go through like preliminary F&I, whatever, like you're going to be able to see a profile to know what it is that they're looking for, and then be able to better handle those objections coming in the door. So I think when we talk about, you know, online checkout experience and how that's changed, there's more information ever to empower the salesperson to close that deal, and more information for the buyer to feel like they can trust the salesperson to do due diligence and be transparent, because it's all out on the table and it's very simple to understand. And it's very different from the days, and I'm sure anyone here who's ever bought a car before who isn't on the sales side, you know, I think I spent 6.5 hours with my newborn just buying a truck. 6.5 hours. It was a challenge. And I just remember thinking there's got to be a better way. And naturally, I realized after the fact it would be online e-commerce. And so for buyers, I think that's huge. And I think that the past, you know, year or two has really cemented that fact that, you know, 6 hours, 4 hours, even 3 hours, it's just not an appropriate amount of time. And it's not an enjoyable experience. And you want your buyers to be excited to come back to you, not to go, I can't believe I'm going to go spend all that time there again if they want to get a second car or trade in. And so, I mean, on your end, it sounds like that's pretty much a universal experience.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and you said it before. I mean, it really is. It's a higher lead to sale ratio once they go through the process.
Exactly. Yeah. So picking up on the next question, and this is always the fun part because we're fairly conceptual with our opening questions, but tactics and real life application are often one of the things that folks who are attending the webinars really want to hear about. So I would say dealer strategies. You know, what dealer strategies drive the most success with e-commerce from what you've seen?
Okay, so it's going to be messaging for me is what I think. And it's going back to consistency, having consistent CTAs, because you have buy online now, or you have unlock my best price on the same VVP or SRP. You're not having a consistent branding experience for the consumer. They're automatically confused. Everyone wants the best price, but if you're just taking them to a form fill, then you're not giving a consistent experience. Why would I buy the car now if I can just click this button and get a better price? That's by far one of my biggest complaints. And I think that's where we strive to guide dealers to changing their messaging if they're truly focused on e-commerce. And then it goes again to guiding the consumer and educating the consumer. Putting up banners on the website, on the SRP pages, building out a how-to, why buy pages that talk about the online buying experience and the dealership itself. And then really where you see it is, and this is more on the SEO side, but dealership photos. If your website just looks like an out-of-the-box dealer website, why should the consumer stay on the website? So even though they're going through the digital process, having those photos of the staff of the dealership allows them to experience somewhat of the dealership aspect of it by viewing the dealership's photos and staff photos, even if they're just going to be in e-commerce and buy sold online.
Right, right. So it's essentially a reflection of the same type of thing that you would want as a consumer if you were going into a showroom. You want to see a face, you want to know a name, you want to see the About Us page. I know I go to almost every About Us page. If I'm about to do a big ticket buy, I'm definitely looking at who I'm buying from, right? And making sure that there's like a digital reputation element that's involved with that. And to your point about photography, DSLR and descriptions and painting that picture, I think, and I'm sure you spent a lot of time going over this with the dealerships that you work with, that that can't be mentioned enough, because what it does is if you're coming in and you're only seeing 2 or 3 photos, it doesn't really give you a sense of what the automobile looks like, internal, external. Like, I'm not saying you necessarily need to have a 360 virtual reality tour, like virtual 360 camera for every car, but like just being able to understand, like, hey, this is a best practice. It's something that your consumers now expect, right? The day of just like, here's the front of the car and we'll see you on the lot are over, right?
Absolutely.
Or if not over, rapidly dwindling, especially when we're talking about things like, low inventory. It's more important than ever to have an accurate representation, because if they show up, you want to close it. You don't want to risk that someone will show up and be like, I just got catfished. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's not what I saw online when I swiped right on your dealership. And so I think that it's a huge part of it, because it's a representation of who you are as a dealership, and it frames what you're selling to those buyers. And that's such a fundamental piece that I think can't be stated enough. So I'm excited to hear that you agree with that.
You see that photos have a direct impact on conversions. The amount of photos of the vehicles directly impact if that car is going to have a conversion aspect of it.
Definitely. All right. And then Sarah, was there anything on our end, or any inbound questions?
Yeah, so we did get a question in, a lot of dealers are dealing with low inventory levels right now. Have you seen that with your dealer partners, Chris? And what kind of strategies are the dealers using to work with that and manage through that situation?
No question, every dealer in the country is struggling with low inventory. I think what we're seeing it is pushing. I mean, you can't get any more new cars at this moment, so they're really focused on buying trades from customers, from previous customers, buying from customers off the street. I actually had one of my dealers locally call me and offer to buy my Mustang, which went for more than what I sold it for. And I sold it just because I was going to get something else. And they called me and said, Chris, we'll give you this offer. So the dealers that are doing that really do see, if you're focusing on buying trades, I know they're expensive now. The other aspect of it is to combat low inventory. We're pushing our dealers to do refinancing of vehicles.
Right. So you're basically taking that and turning it on its head and saying, here's how we're going to optimize what little is there already to have a pathway to get to the other side of the event that we're seeing with the chip shortage and the inventory impact.
There's no other way to do it. I think you have to.
Yeah. I think it's a survival tactic to get through what is obviously impactful to the industry as a whole. And I think the one parting question, because I know we're going to be coming up on time, is, Chris, if you had one piece of advice that you could give to someone who was considering Modal, looking at, other solutions that are in the market, and we're, struggling to make a decision during obviously an intense time in automotive e-commerce and automotive in general, given all the, the turbulence the past year and a half has been kind of wild. What would that piece of advice be for them to make a decision?
Just do it. I mean, I wouldn't be here talking about Modal if I didn't believe in it. If it didn't convert well, if it didn't help dealers sell cars, I wouldn't be here. I might only talk about things I believe in. I would say just do it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and to Sarah for emceeing, and to everyone who attended. Again, thank you all for joining us today. It was a great conversation. Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you for having me.